Batman has faced some pretty terrifying foes during his career of serving justice, from psychotic clowns to fear-inducing scarecrows. But one of his most terrifying isn't just a mere man in a costume or covered in makeup, but a beast born of the one thing Batman fears most: bats. It might seem silly that Batman has a fear of bats, but it's that fear that he uses and channels against the very corruption of Gotham City. On Leather Wings was the very first episode produced for the series. It was supposed to be the first released, but likely because of the success of Batman Returns, producers wanted to capitalize on Catwoman, so the very first episode actually aired was The Cat and the Claw Part 1. And there are certain things in this episode that definitely hint that it was supposed to be the first, like the 100 different shots we get of the Batmobile. In most episodes, Batman just hops in the car and drives off, but here, because we're seeing it for the first time, they really went out of their way to give you as many different angles as they could and really show off the new design. The title card for the episode, which would go on to inspire the title cards for the rest of the series, is really fitting for the style and tone of the show. They wanted the show to feel like a noir from the 1940s and 50s, but also timeless. The gray scale and lettering really makes it feel like something from that time period, while the introduction of police blimps, something that has never existed, feels old yet futuristic at the same time. The Gotham police pick something up on their radar as it quickly flies by. And the very first time we hear Kevin Conroy speak in this series isn't even as Batman or Bruce Wayne, but as one of these pilots.
There it is.
There what is?
It looked like bat wings.
The bat creature flies against the Gotham skyline, and something you'll notice is just how dark everything is. All the backgrounds in this series were painted on black paper using lighter colors, as opposed to darker colors on white paper like most animation studios would use. This gave this series a much different and older look than anything else that was coming out at the time or even since. The Man-Bat makes its way to Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, where it grabs a night watchman and tosses him out a window, but not before the man accidentally records some of its screams on his voice recorder. Since there has never been any record of a bat creature before, Gotham police believe Batman to be responsible for what happened. Harvey Bullock of Gotham PD is allowed to put a strike force together to capture the Batman, and we get our first look at Harvey Dent prior to becoming the villain known as Two-Face. Hilariously, this was supposed to be the first time we get to see Batman, and he's just hanging out in the Batcave reading a newspaper.
You mean it wasn't you tossing guards out of windows last night?
I only toss butlers, Alfred.
Batman thinks he's being set up. There have been other pharmaceutical companies that have been broken into, but this is the first time that there's been any violence. So the world's greatest detective is going to investigate. Inside Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, he's spotted by a couple making out and sneaks his way into the crime scene. Batman finds the recorder and a hair sample, but Bullock's strike force has already arrived on the scene. Commissioner Gordon makes an appearance and tells Bullock that another pharmaceutical company has been broken into and he has the wrong suspect. Batman gets cornered in a room by the strike force and nearly escapes an explosion while also saving one of the men. The following day, Bruce Wayne brings the recording and hair samples to Dr. March, Francine Langstrom, and her husband Kirk Langstrom at the Gotham Zoo.
It's a recording I made of the noise in my chimney.
I love how Bruce Wayne gets the shifty eyes while he's trying to gauge their reactions. Dr. March calls back to tell Bruce it's nothing more than a brown bat, and the sounds were starlings and brown bats fighting. However, Batman has already analyzed both, and neither has come back with a match, so someone is definitely lying. Batman enters the lab looking for March, but finds Kirk instead. Kirk tells him he was the one stealing the chemicals to create a formula that would bring about a new species, neither man or bat. In an early draft, he wasn't just going around stealing chemicals, but he was also killing people, which they decided to remove because it would have been a little too dark for a children's show. He tested the formula on himself, and the beast began to take over. It knew the formula necessary to bring itself into existence, and Kirk has now lost control. The transformation scene into the Man-Bat is fantastic and fairly scary for something that is just supposed to be a kid's show. It feels very reminiscent to something you'd see in a werewolf film. Kirk isn't all gone, but Batman cannot let him get away. Man-Bat tries to lose Batman in a construction site, but Batman manages to get a choke around his neck. Bullock and Gordon nearly fly right into them, and then Batman just starts to lay into Man-Bat, causing it to fly into a building. This brief shot showing Batman bleeding was fairly controversial. Bruce Timm and Paul Dini fought tooth and nail against censors to keep it in the episode. Producer Alan Burnett even said, "The network started to pull back on the amount of blood, scratches, and abrasions we can have. The first episode almost used up our whole quota." It's moments like this that really helped make Batman the Animated Series so special. In the Batcave, Batman goes over the chemicals used to transform Kirk in the first place and thinks he can undo the transformation. At the zoo, a worried Francine comes running to Batman and finds her husband back to normal. The serum that turned him has run its course and he should be fine. For now. On Leather Wings, while not explicitly stated anywhere, seems to take inspiration from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the classic story of a man turned monster after ingesting a chemical compound. But as time goes on, the monster begins to take over, and going back almost becomes an impossibility. You can also compare it to something like the Wolfman, where a man is burdened by a terrible curse that he cannot control. Even though he wants to do good, the monster does what it wants and brings harm to those around him. The trope of a monster being trapped inside, waiting to break free and cause havoc, is fairly old and has been done in tons of different ways. Even Marvel has played with the themes with their Incredible Hulk, a man whose own rage brings an unstoppable monster to the surface. But Man-Bat wasn't just inspired by things, it's also done some inspiring of its own. Take the X-Files Season 8 episode Patience for example. In it, Agents Scully and Doggett come face to face with a part human, part bat monster, which is a direct reference to DC's Man-Bat. Man-Bat first appeared in Detective Comics 400, written by Frank Robbins with art by Neil Adams. Dr. Kirk Langstrom is a zoologist trying to create a formula that would give humans bat-like sonar capabilities. Although when he tests it on himself, he gets more than he bargained for when he himself begins to turn into a bat creature. Unlike the episode, Kirk still has his wits to him for the most part. He can still think and talk normally. The change is a lot slower. He even aids Batman at one point, who thinks Kirk is just wearing a bat costume like him. As Kirk transforms more and more, he begins to lose some of his humanity and his mind along with it. All Batman wants to do is help the man, but the monster doesn't want to go back. At one point, he even forces his fiancée Francine to prove her love to him by taking the formula and changing along with him. They plan to wed, and on the day of their wedding, Batman intervenes and reveals both of them to be Man-Bats. A tussle between the three takes place, but Batman is able to subdue both and apply the antidote, making both of them human once again. Bruce Timm wanted the Man-Bat to be in the first episode because it wouldn't be something you'd come to expect. In an interview with Eric Nolan Weathington in Modern Masters Volume 3, Bruce said, Man-Bat was chosen specifically for the first episode because he wasn't familiar to very many people outside of comic book fans. Nobody had any preconceived notions about him. It wasn't like the Joker, where you had to deal with people expecting him to be Jack Nicholson or Cesar Romero. He also wanted to take this opportunity to explore the more horror aspects of Batman that had never really been explored before, and it doesn't get much more horror than a man turning into a literal bat monster. Early unused designs by comic artist Kevin Nolan showed the Man-Bat more human looking compared to the more bestial final look. Although something I noticed is the design of the head carries many similarities to their final design of Killer Croc, another monster-like villain in Batman's Rogues Gallery. Man-Bat has nearly made several film appearances as well. First, he was talked about being in the unproduced Joel Schumacher film Batman Unchained. This was set to be the 5th Batman film in the franchise, but died after the failure of Batman and Robin. Also, Man-Bat was quickly replaced with Scarecrow and Harley Quinn, who was set to be Joker's daughter come for revenge. Another Man-Bat-centered film was pitched by Lee Shapiro, a Batman fan, and screenwriter Stephen Wise called Batman Dark Knight, the title being a play on the made-for-TV horror film Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, which is fitting because the film was going to feature both the Scarecrow and Man-Bat, with the two somewhat at odds with one another. It was also going to have Batman trying to clear his name after the Man-Bat's reign of terror on Gotham is blamed on him. A fun thing to note is the show opens with Man-Bat flying across the skyline of Gotham, with the police wondering what the hell just flew by them, and this series basically ends the same way as well. In the Justice League Unlimited episode Epilogue, we go some 50 years into the future as Terry McGinnis has taken over the mantle of Batman. This episode basically marks the end of Batman Beyond and the Batman series in general, as Terry glides against the skyline of Gotham and passes some police who wonder what just flew by them, mirroring the opening scene of On Leather Wings. And lastly, before I go, I just want to say, no matter how many men don the cape and cowl, there really won't be another Batman quite like Kevin Conroy, and he will be missed.